r/ask Reddit. What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I didn't take was offering more money, but I just didn't gel with the guy who would be my boss and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I had always wanted to live in, for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance. So if I had taken that, I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. Similar story. 2 offers. One for a little more money. The other had way better retirement plan. The interview for the good benefits company just didn't feel right. Like the interviewer was trying to convince me not to take it. I took the other offer, and the good benefits company merged with another company, moved half their workforce to a 1-company town in BFE, Ohio, and laid off the rest. My interviewer at that company ended up becoming my co-worker at the other company, and his manager ended up being his and my manager at the other company. I worked with a guy who had a higher offer at another company in the same city, both in Houston, but he thought it all just seemed too good to be true. So, even though it offered more money and perks, he stuck by his spidey sense and took the lower paying job, and passed on the job with Enron. Edit. Thank you for the award. A little one. A friend was showing off some handguns he bought with his first paycheck. Checked the chamber to make sure nothing was there. Sighted at me and pulled the trigger. Of course, the gun was loaded. Bullet passed over my right shoulder and buried itself in a chair. We aren't friends anymore for some odd reason. Edit. Well, this blew up more than expected. Thank you for all the well wishes. I'm fine other than minor deafness in my right ear. Edit 2. It was a 9mm semi-auto made in Serbia. Other than that, I have no idea. Gun safety is something everyone should learn before buying them. Glad you're okay, man. Me too. Don't hear fabulously out of my right ear, but no other damage. Some people are too dumb to risk hanging out with. Once at a bar, a woman was surprisingly into me as we danced. If I had had more confidence back then, I definitely could have taken her home. In the end, one of my karaoke buddies ended up with her instead and got caught by her husband that night. I knew a guy that got stabbed by the husband after he went home with a woman. Apparently she liked seeing the husband go crazy on the dude she brought home. I swear there was a movie or show with something like this. The guy tells this dude to sleep with his wife and then beats the shit out of him afterwards. Edit. It was the drone pilot from Jack Ryan. Thanks you/native. Such a weird scene. I broke my lease and moved out of a terrible apartment complex I was living in to move back home because I was broke. 2 weeks later, the whole complex burned to the ground from a meth lab in another unit. A few edits for some commonly asked questions. The apartment was right outside of downtown Birmingham. I didn't have renter's insurance. Broke 20yo at the time, so wouldn't have got any kickback from that. I did end up getting my security deposit back, which they said I had forfeit by breaking the lease, so that was nice. That meth lab wasn't mine. I packed mine up and brought it back to Florida with me where it belonged. I have a similar one. I broke a lease to move home due to being broke. During the course of that lease, there were multiple murders and break-ins all throughout the complex. My apartment was on the first floor, so easy break-in. Edit. For those concerned, it wasn't like a serial killer or anything, just an explosion of gang violence. My apartment was in the ghetto outside of Dallas. That time I didn't go along for the ride when a friend of mine was running weed. Years ago, back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time, and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job. My friend got arrested and did 30 days in jail. That sounds like an awesome job. Jail isn't all it's cracked up to be. 2005. My friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide on where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or a really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night, the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel we decided against. My mom wasn't going to leave for Katrina. I told her I was going to take me and my little sister and hitchhike if she didn't pack the car and leave within the hour. My dad didn't leave and he ended up on the roof with our neighbor because our house got flooded. No way all of us would have survived. Katrina decimated my town. Everything 2 miles inland or less was destroyed. This was my first ever experience dealing with a hurricane since I'm from the Midwest and was in New Orleans for college. Hope you and your family are all safe and doing well now. In 1996, my parents were deciding between 2 houses to move into. They picked the new construction that resulted in being placed on shoddy soil and years of lawsuits when we ultimately moved in 2001. Anyway, the other house they could have picked, presumably on better soil, would have placed my older sister at Columbine High School as a freshman for the 1998 to 1999 school year. Reading this at first like this doesn't seem like a dodge bullet. Like, literally, correct usage, dodge a bullet. I got on an intercity bus and almost sat in the middle but moved and sat at the back. The bus later collided with a truck and got opened up like a tin can. If I had sat where I originally intended I would have been killed. I was late to my bus and instead of running to catch it I decided to miss it and it was later hit by a speeding truck. Caught the one behind it and later saw the aftermath. 2 people died. It does raise the question if you did run down the bus would the 30 seconds of it stopping to pick you up have avoided the crash? High school GF wanted to talk about baby names. I was headed to college. No thoughts of being a parent. My mom even found a note in my pocket listing her favorites if we had a boy. Anyway, we broke up after 2 years. The next guy she dated was a dad within 9.5 months. She was gonna baby trap you. Yikes. My ex-fiance tried to baby trap me. He couldn't even look after our puppy so I said hell no to a baby. Took the condom off without me knowing and then 2 days later told me he'd come in me. I was fuming but I was lucky. Phew. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She previously pulled a knife on me. Dude. Thank God. I was booked on Pan Am Flight 103 which went down over Lockerbie, Scotland. I didn't have a premonition or anything supernatural. I just decided to cancel my seat. Didn't think anything of it until the plane went down and my mother had written down my flight plan and reminded me. This was back in the day when you could cancel without a penalty up to a couple of days in advance. Edit you know. When I posted my response I didn't realize how many comments I would get that involved people who were impacted by this sad event. On any given day, we make decisions. For no concrete reason really. Like, I just chose not to go that day, and we come to learn it was a good decision. I try not to evaluate my decision because I don't want to affect my future decisions by second guessing or trying to work the odds. This is only one example of times that I dodged a significant bullet. Open bracket. I wrote a different post, but erased it before I hit save. Pro tip. To avoid the few days away cancellation fees call, or go online, and reschedule the flight for a week or 2 out, then wait a day and cancel. Thanks for the tip. Not me, a Dutch mate of mine living in Tasmania, had to visit his sick mum in Amsterdam, booking his flight online. He said to his wife, you know, I'm sick of flying Malaysian Airlines. The food is shit, the hosties are miserable, it'll cost more. But I'm booking with Singapore. So, instead of dying on MH17, he was on a plane 40 kilometers ahead of it. Edit. Just to clarify, he was on way home from AMS. Sold my bar and grill business in August 2019. Sold my 3 restaurants in the 20th of February 20 for way more than they were worth. Now 2 have closed. I almost fell for a pyramid scheme in high school. My friend brought me to one of their meetings. ACN, and I was so on board, but my parents talked me down. I was upset at them until I learned more about MLMs and quickly changed my mind. Sometimes I imagine where I'd be now if I went through with it. It wouldn't be pretty, that's for sure. Wow, I remember ACN. What a sham. Totally. That same friend would sometimes pitch it to waiters. And one of them cut him off with I'm not joining ACN LMAO. I think he's still doing it if I recall correctly. He has an actual job for income thankfully, but it's one of those things where they're in too deep to be talked out of it. I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct buzz crack buzz sound as it went by. I think some people were just out clinking in their backyard, adjacent to the lake, and didn't think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I don't think anyone knew I was there either time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there's a backstop. FFS. Also, I don't know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet dodged. As a dead guy, I would be so pissed off to learn my life ended because I was floating in a goddamn boat at the wrong second. How did you die? Physically, a bus. I grew up in Bermuda, and since it is such a small island, cars are limited to one per family, and everyone drives mopeds. I was driving into town, and came up to a red light behind a bus. As is tradition, I scooted around the bus to be in the front of the line of traffic. Literally 2 seconds later, a second bus smashed into the back of the first bus at like 30 miles per hour. I would have been pancaked, without question. 100% dead. I just sat on the side of the road for a bit and thought about my mortality. Edit. Thank you for the awards. My only other Bermuda bus-based encounter was driving home from my first job in the rain. An oncoming bus in the opposite lane went through a massive puddle and sent what looked like a tidal wave of water right at me. It literally picked me and my little Yamaha V50 right up and swept us off the road onto some grass. So I guess in the end it was me one buses one. Had a friend who asked if I wanted to move to CA with him and his family. I was 16 and thought it sounded fun. I didn't know at the time, but he was actually rescuing me from my insane mother and a not so happy home life. When you are abused, sometimes it is hard to know you are abused until you become an adult and gain a perspective. I shudder to think what would have happened to me if I had stayed there. That's interesting. Can you elaborate on the situation if you don't mind? Like, were you close with them that they'd be okay to live with them in their same house? And if so, are you still close with them? If you don't mind. I only knew him for a year, but we became best friends. It was a weird situation. I only met the parents once before I moved out there with them. I was initially supposed to stay just for the summer, but I was told that I could stay longer if I wanted. I think this gave us both an out if things didn't work out. I ended up finishing my last year of high school living with them and stayed until I was 21. The father has since passed, but I am still in touch with my friend. I didn't really find out that they were rescuing me until way later, when the mother told me that my friend told her about my home life to convince her to let me move in. I had no idea at the time. LOL. Finishing up my paper route when I was a kid. Walking home on the sidewalk next to a busy road with sister on the inside. Me dragging our little buggy on the outside. Middle of winter. Car jumps the curb and takes out our buggy. Neither of us know what the hell had just happened other than the ungodly scraping sound and that our buggy was gone. Find out later that the driver saw us run home scared and brought back our buggy, which was utterly destroyed in a crumpled heap. I was pulling the cart and my hand was on it, so I'm not sure how I avoided eating chrome that day. Not a single scratch on me. I still think about it regularly and it's been over 30 years. Kind of similar. 2000-ish friend and I got some root beers from a store and were walking home. Car jumped the curb, shot across the grass and past the sidewalk and came within inches of hitting me. When the car got back onto the next street over, an old man got out of the car and appeared to be having issues with his legs. Friend and I just continued on our way back to his house, where we told his dad, who said something to the effect of, "I am going to have to teach you boys how to cross a street safely." I didn't think too much of it until later in life when I realized A, I didn't do anything wrong. I was 15 feet from the street on the sidewalk, and B, I could have died seriously injured if the driver was a few more inches to the right. I was at the Tacoma Mall when the Tacoma Mall shooting happened, walking right towards where the gunman opened fire when my then fiancé decided to go back into a store we were just in. No shit. The time it took us to get back to the store was the same amount of time it would have taken to be right where it all broke out. 10 seconds one direction or 10 seconds in the other. Hearing the screams and gunshots echoing in the mall was crazy. They locked us in the Suncoast Video store for a while before having us exit out the back. Edit. I'll add a bit more detail if you're interested. I had run into a person I worked with at the time about 10 minutes before the shooting. I think he went back to Macy's and we went to the Suncoast. We were Christmas shopping. The mall was pretty busy. It came down to my fiance remembering she wanted to get someone a series of Friends DVDs. So we headed back. Just as we were a few feet from the store, the first cluster of shots rang off, and there was this shared confusion as to WTF was happening. My first thought was gang violence or something. Open bracket. It's Tacoma after all. Because it sounded like several people firing at once. Echoes. If something like this happened today, I'd think potential mass shooter right away. But then it wasn't so much a thing. We had to yell at several women who were still looking around outside the store, confused, telling them to shelter inside, waving them in. My memory might be off, but it felt like maybe 20-30 of us crammed in the Suncoast, them having put the metal gate down and locking it. So we're all in there, just listening to the gunshots and screaming, wondering what was happening. As time went on and the shooting continued, it seemed less likely to be some gang thing as they'd get TF out. So I and others started saying we need to exit the store. He could have shot through the metal gate. As fish in a barrel. I was spared from seeing anyone who was shot. The co-worker I had seen just prior was not so lucky, as he was around several who got hit. It understandably really affected him. He was this tough truck driver dude who doesn't take shit from anyone. When I saw him and we talked about it, he started crying. Crazy how much pain one person is capable of inflicting. I think about this day a lot. Being spiritual and not religious, I feel like God spared us that day. I'm sorry to hear about others who were adversely impacted by that day. My dad's buddy was one of the people shot at the Tacoma Mall. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year later as a result of his injury. What an awful event. I'm glad you're okay. Edit. To clarify, he did not pass away during the shooting. He passed away about a little over a year later due to complications from his injury. I was 12 when this happened and not a doctor, so I can't give you a detailed description of how the injury led to complications to his passing. All I know from my dad is he was out Christmas shopping with his wife and was shot in the leg. My dad was pretty torn up after it and he generally isn't like that, so the event made a lasting impact. I was supposed to hang out with a couple of friends one night. We were going to go to a party that we were all invited to the weekend before. I asked to get off work early so I could go to the party. My manager let me go early, so I went to go find my friends. But I had a really bad feeling all day and it just kept getting worse. Instead of turning left to go to my friend's house, I went right and went home. I found out a few weeks later that they got busted with cocaine in their car. They were 16 and 17 at the time. I was 18. So I would have been screwed. When I was 19, all of my friends decided to take a last-minute trip to Canada. I was at work and, even though we were dead, my boss refused to let me leave early so I could go. I was super pissed and was texting my friend pretty consistently until she just stopped answering. I didn't hear from for a couple of days and then she called me to tell me what happened in Canada. Someone forgot they had mace in their purse and upon Canadian authorities searching their bags, found said mace. They were all detained and strip searched. The girl's father had to pay a $500 fine before they could be released. To this day, I have never been happier to have had such a beach of a boss. Is mace illegal in Canada? Not me, but my dad. He traveled to London for work back from 2001 to 2007. He was booked for the day off on the 7th of July 2005, as that is my birthday, and the train he normally got to work was one of the ones that was bombed by terrorists. Edit. I wasn't born in 2005, just to clarify. It was just the date I had a birthday on that my dad wanted to spend with me. I think that was the one where people would normally have taken the Piccadilly line changed because of a delay, so a lot of people died due to a fault on the Piccadilly line. The Pic was one of the lines that got bombed. First carriage. The driver still works for London Underground, just not on the trains. I've seen him before when he's come to my depot for a day with an instructor to keep his license valid, even though he has no desire to ever drive in passenger service again. My friend was jealous that her sister was 2 months pregnant. We ended up having sex that night and she told me she'd like to conceive a child. I decided that was the perfect time to fake a no. For the next few hours, she kept feeling inside herself saying, "Are you sure you came?" After a while I had to fuss that I faked it. The proper answer is, I jerked off earlier today so I didn't really have much come out. This guy jerks. A year ago, almost to the day, I was offered a new job. It was exactly what I was looking for and was really excited. They told me they would email the contract, but after a week I hadn't had anything. After a lot of chasing, they told me they'd change the structure of the organization so the position wasn't available. I have a month's notice for my current job, and if I had taken the job, my notice period would have been after the cutoff date for furlough in the UK. The new job was in an industry that collapsed through the pandemic, and the industry I work in has boomed. If I had received that email, I would have probably been close to bankruptcy now. When I was about 10 years old, I leaned backwards onto a tall bookcase shelf, which happened to have a sword collection on the highest shelf. Many of these swords had their blades exposed for show. And what would happen at that very moment? That shelf gave way and all of the swords came and landed on me, including my head. Surprisingly, I got not a single cut, no concussion, and only a small bruise on the head. And being young, I dismissed this incident with gracious forgetfulness. Bookcase of Damocles. I once met a girl at a bar a few years ago. She was hot and she started a conversation with me. I don't remember about what, but at the end of it I wanted to ask her out. But being extremely shy, I couldn't. If she hadn't started to talk to me, I would have just admired and avoided her. Being a big and awkward guy. Anyway, I went to the bathroom to clear my head, and when I came back I saw my friend who I came with asked her out. A total dong move because I told him I wanna ask her out. And I just stand there with an awkward smile waiting for them to leave so I could drink my anger away. Couple of days after that, a mutual friend said that that friend from the bar was robbed by a girl he had brought to his apartment. So still today I get mixed feelings when I see him. Edit. Thanks for taking the time and reading my story. I just wrote about an incident in my life. Didn't think it would get any awards. Thank you. Well, you should still hate him, but at least the stranger got him back for you. About 6 months after I left my ex, he got caught sexting a 12-year-old. He was 34 at the time. Edit. I had the wrong age. He was 34 when it started. By the time he was in jail, he was 36. My first serious boyfriend, as an adult, is now serving time in federal prison after being busted for distributing child pornography. Absolutely horrifying. I really needed a job and the manager at a dispensary in my area offered me a spot. I said no, and 4 days later they were raided and everyone got arrested. I'm confused. Did they not have a license? Or are the feds just raiding dispensaries because it's technically still illegal by federal law? Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.